Welcome to Pandas Nightmares. In today's video, we will cover some of the creepiest unsolved crimes people have heard of. If you do like my content, do like and subscribe as it will help me grow. Since I am a small channel, I am creating content to try to raise funds for my dad's treatment. So if you want to support his ongoing battle, the GoFundMe link is in the description section below. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And now let's get started. Enjoy. Story 1. I dated a guy a while back whose father was a retired cop who had worked the Waterdown area near Burlington, Ontario. From what I remember, there were several break-ins over the course of a few months. That all occurred in the middle of the night while the residents were home. Nothing was ever stolen, no one was ever harmed, and there were no signs of forced entry. The intruder would just stand beside the bed, sprinkle some baby powder over his feet to leave an outline, just to let them know he had been 3 feet away watching them as they slept. They never caught the guy. Story 2. I liked the disappearance of the DA that was investigating Penn State almost 10 years before the scandal came out. His laptop was found in a lake, assumed dumped there by whoever disappeared him. But then, after Sandusky was arrested and charged, somebody got around to looking at Gricker's home computer history. Among the Google searches were things like water damage to a hard drive and how to completely erase hard drive. Also, I hope I'm remembering this right, he had already declined to press charges against Sandusky in '98, but kept telling people he had something big he was working on. Spooky all around. Story 3. The McStay family disappearance, murder. A family of 4 with 2 boys, ages 4 and 5. One day they just disappeared from their home, left eggs out on the counter, bowls of popcorn for the kids left on the couch, their dogs left outside, the doors all locked with no sign of forced entry. Their car was found later in a mall parking lot full of newly purchased toys, the kids' car seats strapped in, and the driver and passenger seats left in a position appropriate for the parents' sizes. No one had any clue where they went or why. 3 years later, their skeletal remains are found in 2 shallow graves, 170 miles from where the car was found. Story 4. Disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. Basically, a girl goes missing during a cruise with her family in 1998. A year later, a guy reported being approached by her at a brothel. She told him her name is Amy Bradley and asked him to help her. Before he could do anything, she was escorted upstairs. That guy ended up reporting this to the police. Several months later, by the time he reported it, the brothel had been burned down. Story 5. Maura Murray disappeared the evening of February 9th, 2004, after crashing her car on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. She was in college, emailed professors she had to go home due to a family emergency false, packed her bags, and left. She withdrew $280 from an ATM. She then bought $40 worth of alcohol. She got into a car accident at approx 7:30. Someone pulled over and offered to call the police. She refused and asked them not to. The witness drove home and called the police. By the time they arrived, she was gone, and all her belongings were left in the car except her debit card, credit card, and cell phone, none of which have ever been used or found. Story 6. Lori Erica Kennedy. Seriously? Google her. Creepy as shit. Basically, a woman believed to be from the Pacific Northwest stole a birth certificate and started a new life. But there is absolutely zero account or evidence of her before 1988. She actually married and had a baby before killing herself post-divorce in 2010, which was when her ex-husband found the birth certificate and name-changed docs buried in her closet. The only theory I've seen that's remotely plausible was that she's an escapee from an FLDS community. It could explain that she never did have her own birth certificate. And more than one person's pointed out a similarity between her and an FLDS prophet's family that got into some serious trouble in the 80s. Story 7. I live in San Antonio, Texas. There's a story about a maid walking into a room and seeing this man wrapping up sheets soaked with blood. She started screaming. He took off. The cops showed up and found blood all over the bed and in the tub. They followed the trail of blood outside, but it was raining, so they lost it. They found out he was at another hotel. He killed himself right before they opened the door. Well, they never found out who he killed. He had been seen bringing women over to his room. The city had a lot of construction going on in the 60s, so they think he threw the bag in some cement. Story 8. The Sauder Children. On December 24, 1945, Jeannie Sauder, mother of 9 children, went to bed in their family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Some of them were allowed to stay up while she did so, and she fell asleep. She was woken at midnight by a phone call, and a woman's voice asked if someone Jeannie didn't recognize was there. Then it laughed and hung up. She also reported hearing noises on the roof. After having fallen asleep again, she woke up in the early hours of the morning to the smell of smoke, finding the house on fire. She and her husband managed to rescue 4 of the children, but when looking for their ladder, the husband found it missing, and none of the family's trucks were working to go and get help with. 5 children went missing, and though apparently bones and organs were found in the ashes of the house, they were deemed by a coroner to belong to an animal. Then Mrs. Sauder received a letter postmarked from Kentucky in 1968 that contained a picture of a young man with Louis Sauder. "I love Brother Frankie. Ilo boys," and 90132 or 35 inches written onto the back. The family still believes their children were kidnapped and possibly taken to Italy, as I recall, the family having moved from there to the US years previously. Story 9. Had a friend go missing 5 days before the 4th of July go missing. He was kind and soft-spoken, never did drugs. But the last night anyone saw him, he told our group of friends while we were out at a club, quite suddenly, that our lives were in inexplicable danger, and we had to get the fuck out of there right now or everyone is going to die. We got him outside and calmed him down. Then he just took off running. He was a big dude and we couldn't catch up to him. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. 5 days later, on July 4th, he turned up face down in Montrose Harbor. A video from a nearby convenience store turned up showing him the next day after he went missing, coming in and asking if anyone turned in a lost cell phone. Autopsy was inconclusive, and the comprehensive toxicology report was negative. It's been a year, and we're still left with questions behind his death. This was around the same time there a handful of college and postgrad students showed up face down in other harbors around Chicago. Story 10. The lady who was found in the water supply tank on the roof of a hotel in Los Angeles. People were bathing in and drinking that water for weeks. They found her when people complained of foul-tasting water and black water coming out of the shower. The coroner ruled it an accidental death by drowning, but it's a really weird story. The tanks were on the roof, gated, locked, had an alarm system, and they found her in the tank with the lid secured. They had to cut the tank open to remove the body. Story 11. The Keddy Murders. This was the loose basis for the movie The Strangers. Took place in 1981. A 36-year-old woman and her 5 kids were staying in a cabin outside of Quincy, CA, in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I actually live somewhat near this area. It's truly a remote, forested, summertime cabin living type of place. On the night of the crime, the oldest daughter stayed the night at a friend's cabin. When she returned in the morning, she found her mother, 15-year-old brother, and his 17-year-old friend completely massacred, and her 12-year-old sister missing. The victims had all been bludgeoned with a hammer, tied up, stabbed, strangled. Blood was splattered everywhere. Furniture was smashed into pieces. Walls were pounded on. A steak knife had been used so forcefully that it was bent 25 degrees. Whoever committed the crime had gone on an absolute rampage, and was apparently there for about 10 hours. Curiously, the mum's 2 youngest sons and their friend who was staying the night were found unharmed in an upstairs bedroom. Only one of them claimed to have seen anything, but he was so young that his statement was pretty useless to the police. Of note is that the unharmed friend was the prime suspect's son. Although that guy was eventually released by the cops due to a lack of evidence, the murders were never solved. 3 years later, part of the missing 12-year-old girl's skull was found about 50 miles away. She had been decapitated. Also worth mentioning is that the resort where all this happened was never the same after. People avoided it for years. It fell into disrepair and kind of became a ghost town. Squatters and bums would stay there. Some rich guy bought the resort at one point and tried to bring it back to life, but I think it's still largely avoided. The cabin where the murders occurred was finally demolished in 2004. Story 12. The DC Madame. Basically, in the mid-2000s, this lady's $300 hour $500,000 brothel in the US Capitol was raided, and the Madame was ordered to turn over her clientele list. She told reporters that her list that spanned years was thousands of clients, including many powerful national politicians. Because of this, she feared for her life and insisted if she was found dead, it would be a murder made to look suicide. In an interview on Alex Jones' show in July 2007, Palfrey explicitly stated, "I'm not planning to commit suicide," and made clear her motivation to present her case at trial, saying, "I plan on exposing the government in ways that I do not think they want me to expose them." So naturally, before she could be made to testify, on May 1, 2008, Palfrey was found hanging in a storage shed outside her mother's mobile home in Tarpon Springs, Florida. Police found handwritten suicide notes in the bedroom where she was staying, dated a week before her death. The autopsy and the final police investigation concluded her death was a suicide. Story 13. The Somerton Man. A body was found on Somerton Beach, dead and propped up against a seawall. There was no obvious cause of death. The man had no identification. No one claimed the body, and he matched no missing persons description. In the 40s, this wasn't completely unheard of, so it wasn't big news. But then the case got weird. In tracing his path based on the train-bus tickets they found in his pockets, they discovered his suitcase, which also had no identification. In fact, labels were cut out of the clothes. It wasn't that someone lifted his wallet when they found his body. He'd purposely hidden his identity ahead of time. A second examination of the body revealed a tightly rolled up piece of paper with the words "Tamam Shud" on it, loosely translated to "It is ended," hidden in a watch pocket of his pants. Someone came forward with a copy of a popular poetry book, the Rubaiyat, that they had found in the back seat of their car near where the body was found, and the last page, which should have contained the words "Tamam Shud," was torn out. Except when police tried to trace this version of the book, it was one that had never been printed anywhere. Although the book was popular, the typeset, size, and shape of this copy was completely unique in the world. The back of the book had a mysterious code written in it, and 2 phone numbers. Actually, it had been written on the torn-out back page, but the indents were still visible on the back cover. One number was a bank. The other was a nurse who lived blocks away from the beach. The nurse insisted she didn't know the man, but when Sean the body detectives agree, she clearly appeared to recognize him. The nurse had been an army nurse during the war, and had been known to give copies of the poetry book away to another man, an army intelligence officer. The nurse's identity was kept secret for many years, but within the past year her children have come forward. and said she confided to them that she did know the man but never gave any details on how, and that she was a spy during the war. The code written in the book was never cracked, even though virtually every code breaker in the world, amateur and professional, for the past 60 years, has given it a go. Oh, and that poetry book, the Rubaiyat? Another copy of it, also completely unique in the world, its title page said it was a 7th edition, but the publishing house had only printed 5 editions of it. It was also linked to another mysterious death of a high-ranking government official. He was found dead in a park with the book open on his chest. A woman who testified at the inquest of his death was found dead in her bathtub, wrists slit open. And guess who frequented the hotel bar across the street from the park he was found in, and had given a copy of the book to another man there 2 months after he died? The nurse. The article linked gives a much more thorough explanation, with a few weird theories. Highly recommend checking it out. Such a creepy case. Story 14. I heard this from one of my professors who used to be a detective. This is a true story that happened in London, Ontario, Canada, a city with countless serial killers, and in general strange and sketchy people. My professor claimed London is the only Canadian city that is truly noir. This story is in fact entirely true. This was back in the 60s. A girl goes missing on her way home from her job as a waitress on a diner, just off the 401 highway on the outskirts of town. Her body is found 3 days later in a small town, roughly an hour away. Her clothes were found in another town, in a different direction, roughly 30 minutes away from where the diner was. Her body was laid in a sexual position, her jewelry and contents from her purse all spread out around her, and it was obvious someone with necrophilia tendencies had revisited the corpse many times. Her best friend is a co-worker at the diner. She said she didn't see anything out of the ordinary. This is when a witness comes forward. She said a creepy guy was bothering the victim at the diner the night she went missing. A sketch artist comes in and does a drawing of this alleged person. The police search the victim's bedroom for clues. She still lived with her parents. They find a diary. The diary has something suspicious in code, and is one of the last entries. Apparently the cops broke the code and it said, "I French kissed Michael," with a picture that looked to be taken 20 years prior of a young man. This young man looks uncannily like the sketch. Now this is where it starts to get weird. The witness starts saying she is getting phone calls at her home. It started with just someone calling, then hanging up, then calling and breathing on the line. One day, in broad daylight, she is walking her dog when she is attacked by someone. Her arms and face get slashed, not too severely, and the assailant says something along the lines of, "I'm going to kill you" or something. She managed to fight him off with the help of her dog, then runs to a local store and gets help. She never got a good look at what he looked like. She doesn't call the police. Instead, when she gets home later that day, after the hospital, she calls the principal of an all-boys boarding school. Apparently this guy is known around town as a complete weirdo. He answered the phone with hello. She hangs up and calls the police. Apparently that hello sounded exactly like the person who attacked her, and apparently back in the day, that was enough evidence for the police. The police arrest him and search his house. In his basement are jars filled with poo, and what looks like recently destroyed film and footage of kiddie porn of the kids at the school. The police think, well, this guy is definitely the killer. He is fucked, turns out. Has a legitimate alibi with witnesses, and the police have just stumbled upon another one of the many weirdos of London, Ontario. Although he is a psychopedo, he is not the psycho killer. The police start to suspect that maybe something is off with the witness. Maybe the wounds were even self-inflicted. The police go back to the photo and the message from the victim's diary, "I French kissed Michael." They start asking around and talk to her best friend, who as mentioned prior also works at the diner. The best friend mentions that both her boyfriend's middle name and her boyfriend's dad's first name is also Michael. Both the boyfriend and the dad have committed sexual-based crimes in the past. They are put under suspicion. And also the boyfriend's best friend, who recently got out of jail for molesting and beating a young girl, is also investigated. This is when another witness comes forward, one who remained anonymous. This new witness said she saw the victim willingly get into the back seat of a car as the front two seats were taken. The witness said it looked like the victim knew the people in the car. Now the police are looking for two people. It has got to be the boyfriend and the dad of the best friend. Unfortunately, the dad and boyfriend have legitimate alibis. Now the best friend of the boyfriend's "stay with me here" also checks out and is subsequently arrested. Apparently he drove to Toronto the night the victim went missing and stabbed a random 5-year-old boy in the stomach. The police discovered this after they questioned him. He goes back to jail. The boy lived BTW. The police are at another dead end. This is when it starts to get weird. The best friend of the victim, again the one at the diner with the fucked BF, is discovered overdosed in a parking lot, clutching a note saying, "I am so sorry, insert victim's name. I will carry this secret with me to the grave." She is rushed to the hospital. It is also worth mentioning here, remember the first witness? The crazy one who got the pedo arrested? Oh yeah, her house burnt down and everyone inside died. The fire? Oh, it turns out it was accidental. Strange. Anyway, back to overdosed best friend. She recovers only to have seemingly completely lost her mind. She is incoherent, doesn't remember anything, and they can't get anything out of her. This is a cold case. My professor, who runs a sort of cold case society, have gone back and looked at the case with modern technology. The victim's best friend is crazy and now claims the victim was murdered by 2 older cops from Baltimore, that it is a big police conspiracy, and she didn't say all those years ago because she was scared of being murdered too. The best friend's boyfriend and dad, both dead. The best friend's boyfriend's best friend has been deported back to Scotland. The picture that was found in the diary is something like a 98% match from the sketch artist drawing, using some kind of, don't yell if I get this wrong, modern map analysis, where basically it says that everything the culprit did has to revolve around how he will eventually get back home. So, by analyzing where the diner was, where the body was found, where the clothes were found, they can kind of triangulate where he is. Apparently they found the guy still alive and not arrested. He has the main suspect in another similar, although less weird case. He looks like the sketch artist drawing. He is living in the right town where the map analysis thingy said the killer lived. And the body was found 1 kilometer where he had a cottage as a kid. Anyways, I hope someone reads this. It's quite bizarre, and I am sorry if I got some of the details wrong. Story 15. In the 1980s, the Japanese food giant Izaki Glico was blackmailed by a mysterious group of apparent supervillains, calling itself the Monster with 21 Faces. It started with 2 armed men who broke into the home of the president of Glico, kidnapping him in front of his family. The men held the executive in a warehouse, calling the company and demanding 100 million yen and 100 kilos of gold bullion. The victim escaped the warehouse before he could find out whether or not his company was willing to pay to ransom his ass. None of the bad guys were caught, and that's too bad, because the monster wasn't through. A couple of weeks later, several cars in the company parking lot were set on fire. Then, the monster began to send letters. In the first letter, sent in a plastic container along with hydrochloric acid, because why the hell not? The monster claimed they had poisoned Glico's candies, which resulted in Glico losing $21 million worth of product that had to be pulled from shelves. The number may be a coincidence, but then again, who knows? The monster taunted the police by detailing in a letter its method of entry, what typewriter it used to write the message, and where it found the container with the acid in it. It didn't matter. Cops scoured the country for them and came up empty. Soon enough, just to prove they were toying with everyone, the monster suddenly sent a letter stating its forgiveness of Glico and moved on. It gets weirder. The monster then turned its attention to another food company, Morinaga. Another letter was sent, similar to the Glico one, only this time, investigations turned up a total of 21 packages laced with the highly toxic sodium cyanide. Being the polite, kind of shadowy, creepy terrorist group. The boxes were helpfully labeled with contained toxins, an example all criminals should follow. The police, getting desperate, thought they caught a glimpse of the mastermind behind the monster during a money drop. The group had demanded cash from another company. An officer described the criminal mastermind as a man having eyes like those of a fox, which would give him the nickname the Fox-Eyed Man. The same mysterious man was spotted again later, in a car during a sting operation. He escaped, but the cops found the car and a radio transceiver that he had been using to listen into all of the police communications during the sting. So finally, they've got a description of one of the bad guys that resulted in nothing. The monster tormented several corporate giants for years, mocked the police, walked the streets as some of the most wanted men in the world, and not a single one of them ever got caught. A police superintendent got so frustrated by being outmaneuvered by the monster that he resigned in disgrace. Oh, wait, we misread that. He actually committed suicide by fucking setting himself on fire, before disappearing into the night like goddamned Kaiser Soze. The monster released a letter mocking the dead man, and announced it would stop torturing food companies, apparently taking this entire thing as some sort of childish game. The monster's final words to the public: "We are bad guys. That means we've got more to do other than bullying companies. It's fun to lead a bad man's life." That is all for today. If you have enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe. If you want to help in my dad's fundraiser, I would truly appreciate it. Hope you have an absolutely amazing day. You can also check my other videos on screen.